ladies and gentlemen, citizens of planet Earth, to the debut episode of the Anonymous Headquarters podcast, TheAnoncast. My name's Alec Heidel. I'm an author at AnonHQ.com. I'm a former police officer, and I will be your host for the Anoncast. On this week's episode, I had the opportunity to sit down and talk with the CEO and founder of the Cannabis Consumer Coalition, Larissa Bolivar. I would like to take a moment, however, to thank everybody who sent in an email. We received hundreds and hundreds of emails of support. We received hundreds of questions, comments, and we asked for you to send us information on anyone in your community making a difference, anyone that you think that we need to be aware of, anybody that you think that promotion through this podcast can help their cause. And you responded. I'd also like to thank everyone who sent in a design for our t-shirt design contest. We did pick 3 winners. If we didn't pick yours, I apologize. We had just way too many quality entries, and we couldn't pick all of them. But we do have 3 designs picked. If you head over to TheAnoncast.com, click on Support the Anoncast, those 3 shirts are now available. The 3 t-shirt contest design winners were Lori McEwen, Websa, and Andrea Floresta. And a very special thanks to Websa, who helped design our Anoncast website. One last thing before we get started. Today's episode is sponsored by SeditionShirts.com. Sedition Shirts is currently looking for new artists and new designs. If you head over to SeditionShirts.com, read a little bit about the company, and if you feel like submitting a design, they'll pay you on every shirt sold, not just a one-time fee. They'll pay you forever on every shirt design that they sell. Are you angry at the state of the world and want everyone to know? SeditionShirts.com. If you're interested in sponsoring the podcast, head over to TheAnoncast.com, click on sponsors, and if you like what you read, contact us. One thing about sponsorship and about our t-shirt sales is that 20% of all the proceeds that come in from sponsorship and t-shirt sales will go into the Anonymous Headquarters Community Fund, which will be used to donate to people, organizations, communities in their times of need. On this week's show, I had the opportunity to speak with Larissa Bolivar, the founder and CEO of the Cannabis Consumer Coalition. Over the past 14 years, Larissa has been a key figure in shaping the cannabis industry into what it has become in Colorado. She's worked on industry issues such as taxation, compliance, marketing, and was the CEO and founder of Denver's first dispensary, the Colorado Compassion Club. The mission of the Cannabis Consumer Coalition is to provide cannabis consumers with a voice in the growing cannabis industry and to ensure consumer rights and ethical behavior on behalf of cannabis-related businesses. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Larissa Bolivar. Larissa, can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved with the cannabis industry? I know you've been involved here in Colorado since the beginning, pretty much.
Yeah, I moved to Colorado in 2001 as a medical marijuana refugee. And
what exactly is a medical marijuana refugee?
I was living in Virginia at the time, and they don't have, in fact, marijuana is not legal at all. There's a zero tolerance law in Virginia. So at the time I was married, and my husband had spinal stenosis, which is a spinal condition that's degenerative, and there's not much you can do outside of surgery and pharmaceutical pills. So we wanted to live here where he could access marijuana legally. And when we got here, there was no safe access to cannabis. Everybody had to go to their local drug dealer to get cannabis. There's no program, nothing really for medical marijuana at all. So we joined forces with Ken Gorman, who was the founder of the Denver 420 rally, and started educating people along the Front Range in Colorado on how, particularly in Denver and up north, there was Dr. Melanie down in Colorado Springs that was helping patients. So in the Denver and northern regions of the Front Range, we were hosting meetings and teaching people how they could become registered. And then I found one of the first doctors. Ken and I each found one doctor who would come out publicly and sign medical marijuana recommendations. At the time, the DEA had sent letters to doctors threatening their licenses if they recommended medical marijuana because it was a Schedule I. However, it was determined that doctors have a free speech right, a Second Amendment or First Amendment right to recommend cannabis because you're making a verbal recommendation. You're not writing a prescription. And so I have PTSD, and I asked my doctor to sign recommendations, which he started because PTSD is not part of the registry here in Colorado, but since he was a psychiatrist, he had, he's a doctor, so he was able to sign recommendations by looking at people's medical records and reviewing their medical history. And then Ken Gorman found a doctor by the name of Dr. Elke Glaser, and she was in retirement with Parkinson's and came out of retirement to help with our endeavors because she herself was a medical marijuana patient. So with that, we were able to get hundreds of patients legal. And there was another conundrum, though. There was no access. So I formed an organization called Caregivers for Safe Access as a ASA organizer. And we started having regular meetings at a place called the Full Moon Bookstore, which we would dispense from as well. And then we moved to a church called Grant Avenue Methodist Church, like around 2003. We grew out of our space at the Full Moon Bookstore.
Did you run into any legal problems in your initial distribution?
Well, eventually. So we started having meetings at every Wednesday at a church, which we then moved to Thursdays, and we would go over whatever issues were of any interest to cannabis consumers at that time, and then dispense at the end of the meeting. In 2004, I was raided, and my house was raided. And so this is probably the first time where, the reality of how our system works in our country in terms of the criminal justice system and the power that law enforcement and our government has to supersede civil liberties. And by saying that, I mean they invoked the Patriot Act when they raided me. And
what was the reason for the raid? Was there a statute violation, a federal or state?
No, in fact, as we were told, somebody told them we were growing illegally. And they didn't have a search warrant. They invoked the Patriot Act and said that they didn't need a search warrant. No, we were not breaking any. We had 80 plants and 30 patients. So not only were we within state jurisdiction, we were within our legal limits. We were way within our legal limits.
Was it a federal raid?
Patients that we were serving. Yeah, they had 2 DEA agents, and they invoked the Patriot Act.
Okay, because I was in law enforcement for a long time before getting involved with Anonymous, and the idea of conducting a raid without a search warrant is just unheard of. I mean, at the local level, something like that would never get approved. So it's surprising to hear that something like that would happen.
Oh yeah, and it happens all the time. And the thing is that they use civil asset forfeiture laws to do that. So they took all of my equipment, everything, all my plants, all my equipment, books, even. I mean, I think it was obvious that we were growing, but they took our grow books, and never charged us. And they didn't have to because of civil asset forfeiture laws. What Colorado does, and I actually testified on a bill this year in support, which would have restricted cops to only using federal or civil asset forfeiture if there was a charge. Right now, they can take anything they want based on an assumption that you are committing a crime.
Right.
And the reason they do that is so that, and as you probably know, is because of their argument that, if you're doing something illegal, then you can use all of your assets to either leave the state or, of course, fight your way out of it. But we were never even given the opportunity to fight because we were never charged.
Right. And when I did, I unfortunately did seize many a vehicle in my law enforcement career, and the only stipulation was that it was used in the commission of a felony, which is pretty broad.
It is very broad.
But
it is very broad.
So let me.
And we're not the only people that the Patriot Act was used. In fact, the Patriot Act has been used in thousands of drug cases and only a handful of terrorist cases. And the entire time So when the police came to my house, they weren't even in uniform. It was North Metro Task Force. And if you, and I can send you articles.
Okay.
My last name used to be Lawrence. And so all of these articles are under my past life, quote unquote, my married life. But, they, of course, and of course, the spokesperson for the Justice Department, or the attorneys, who was it? Lieutenant Lori Moriarty, I think, was the officer in charge, and she denied that they invoked the Patriot Act. And our Attorney General's office, or not district attorney, I can't think right now. I had to take Benadryl just to let you know, because I have a really bad cold.
Okay.
And my allergies are really bad, and I didn't want to cancel.
Well, let me ask you, how did your initial activities in the cannabis industry or the cannabis movement at the time lead to the creation of the Colorado Compassion Club?
Well, actually, it was that raid. So when they raided us, shortly after, we built a greenhouse because they took all of our equipment. And we had several caregivers donate plants to us. So we quickly put them out in the ground because it was June 1st when they raided us. So we still had a little window of opportunity to get plants outside, and harvested by November. And so we did, and we got the attention of some local gangs as a result of our activities, and ended up getting home invaded and shot at and all kinds of things. And so we were kind of at our wit's end because we're being basically attacked by cops and robbers. And so we decided to move to Berthoud, Colorado, which is about an hour north of Denver, and an hour and a half north of Denver where we were living. And so we were driving to see a lot of our patients, and we were frustrated because, there's a lot of gas involved. And so we toyed with the idea of having a storefront. And then I believe it was November 2005 was when we opened our storefront to better serve our customers. And our whole reasoning behind it was they already raided us and they didn't charge us. If they raid us again and they don't charge us, they're going to look bad. We'll have more leverage at this point. So we had nothing to lose. And that was really, it was just something to solve a logistical nightmare of driving all around Colorado, the front range, to help patients, versus having a place. At the time, we had secured the Rob Corey as our attorney. When we were raided, that's who we contacted, and he supported the idea. Also, he would defend us if we got in trouble for it. So we just went ahead and got the storefront.
Now, currently, you're the CEO of the Cannabis Consumer Coalition. You guys are...
Yeah, I'm the founder.
You're a cannabis consumer watchdog organization, pretty much. Let me ask you, what exactly do cannabis consumers need protection from?
Well, as we speak, we have the whole pesticide fiasco that's happening in Denver. So
for
consumers, whether they're...
For the listeners who are unaware, recently a handful of Colorado dispensaries, actually I have a list here, I'll go ahead and I'll name them: Mindful, The Green Solution, Altitude East, Evolutionary Holdings, Green Cross Colorado, MMJ America, Organic Greens, Rhino Supply Company, and Sweet Leaf were all caught using illegal pesticides.
Yes, and that list has grown. Now it's Live Well and River Rock. And a lot of these organizations, for example, Organic Greens, it's in their name, but and River Rock were advertising themselves as organic. And so they're actually lying to consumers. And so that is what consumers need protection from, is unethical business practices all across the board. And, we live in a society where the bottom line supersedes human rights. I mean, that's just what's so. And so, we got the prison industrial complex. We have, unethical banking practices, all kinds of things that are impacting consumers. We'd be naive to assume that these things wouldn't occur in the cannabis industry. And so I founded the Cannabis Consumers